You're listening to Head Voice, bringing you inside the minds of the best in contemporary a cappella. I'm Evan, and this week we're joined by Sahaana Sridhar, who is the president of the network of Desi A Cappella. If you're listening before April 22nd, be sure to check out the competition that they've put together called All American Awaz, which is in New York City, which we will link in the show notes. One other note is that Sahaana's audio is a little bit lesser quality than mine and Kayla's, but nevertheless, it's a really enlightening episode, and we hope you enjoy.
Hi, everyone. Today we have Sahaana Sridhar on Head Voice, and we're so excited to have her here today. I'm going to pass it over to Sahaana, so could you just start with a little introduction of yourself?
Hey everyone, my name is Sahaana. I am a graduate of Case Western Reserve University, and I'm here to talk to you about South Asian a cappella. I've been doing a cappella for over 13 years now, I think. I started when I was in 6th grade, and it's been one of the best things that I ever did in my life to this day.
So you're the president of the network of Desi A Cappella. Can you talk a little bit about that organization?
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, South Asian a cappella is a genre it's like a subgenre of contemporary a cappella. We have teams all over the country that work on doing mashups and just finding a way to mix Bollywood and Tollywood and all the Indian styles of music with, top 40 songs or whatever songs they like to do. So the network of Desi A Cappella was started in order to find a way for these teams to connect with each other and have an avenue for them to express their music in a place where a lot of people understood the kind of music that they performed.
So how long have you guys been around for?
This is actually our very first year, which is so exciting that we're getting so much traction. We've had South Asian a cappella groups on the scene for, I think, over 15 years, but there's never been kind of a unifying organization. And so that's why I, along with a couple of other alumni from the circuit, decided to create a network so that, alumni could keep in touch with the current groups, people could share their projects and find other people to collaborate with.
So since you've been in the a cappella scene for quite a while, now you mentioned 13 years, you've probably seen a bunch of trends or changes that have happened over time. So could you just speak to some changes that you might have seen specifically in South Asian a cappella music?
Yeah, I think that when South Asian a cappella first started, there was a lot of focus on really doing mashups, and it was more about just making sure that the chords mashed and the songs were kind of in the same area when they mashed them up together. But I think that as we've progressed through the years, that the mashups and the arrangements have been getting so much more intricate. You see that teams aren't shying away from doing just all Hindi songs a cappella now, which is really great. And we're also finding that audiences, regardless of whether they've heard Indian music in the past, are really appreciating hearing South Asian music in the a cappella format, which is really exciting to see. I think we're putting a lot more emphasis on, really finding two songs that meld well together, whether it's with the meanings, because they are in different languages, of course, and the chords, the scales, everything really. It's a pretty big process to try and find the right songs to mash together, but I think that it's just improving more and more every day.
So Pen Masala kind of originated the genre as far as I know. And I think that they kind of pioneered the mashup idea. So what is it about the idea of mashing up, South Asian and Western music together that's so appealing and has lasted so long for South Asian groups?
Yeah, definitely. Pen Masala is the first group that pioneered it, and they've grown to international fame now, which is really great. So basically, South Asian a cappella is really appealing because it allows people to meld their two worlds together. Because I think that a lot of the people who take part in this are sons and daughters of immigrant families, and being able to join together their two lives, whether it's appreciating the Hindi music and the Indian lifestyle that they lead at home, with the American lifestyle that they lead in school and when they got to college. It's a really great way for them to kind of pull their two lives together and produce a artistic product that kind of showcases that.
And I think sort of on the opposite side of this, I think sometimes South Asian groups can kind of be lumped into one category and people view them as one specific style in genre. But could you speak to how you kind of work around that preconceived notion of what a South Asian a cappella group should be or should sound like?
I think that's being done really well by a lot of the individual groups that are in the college campuses right now. So, for example, Maze Mirchi is from the University of Michigan. They are an amazing group. They actually won their quarterfinals, the Great Lakes quarterfinals for their group, and they're amazing, but they go by South Asian inspired a cappella group instead of a South Asian a cappella group, and really, for them, that's a way of saying that, it's not required to have South Asian music, but it's just using the South Asian influences to make arrangements their own. And on the other hand, you have groups like Anoka and the a cappella from University of Maryland and Case Western Reserve University that move more towards really highlighting South Asian songs in the a cappella format. So they'll take some classical Indian songs and they'll try to make it modern in a way that people would be able to appreciate, that wouldn't necessarily listen to these songs outside of, having heard it in this a cappella format. So I think it spans a whole range of different kinds of arrangements, songs, and ideas. And really, I think that it depends on the individual group and how they want to make that story their own.
So earlier you mentioned the concept of teams. So why are a lot of groups, in this network referred to as teams?
I think it's almost because it's a sport. In the way that I think a lot of South Asian a cappella teams, what they aspire to really is to be able to compete and show off their skills in a lot of different venues. And that requires a lot of traveling and getting outfits and costumes and just putting everything together. It really feels like a sport a lot of the times. I think that, obviously the groups also do perform on campuses and release albums and things of that sort, but the way that they get to expose their kind of music to the greater a cappella community and just like the greater community in general is to compete and to go and perform at bigger spaces. So I think that's probably why I would refer to it more as teams than I would just an a cappella group on campus.
So something interesting that I think you were talking about earlier is how groups sometimes use classical Indian music in their arrangements, and I've actually seen a lot of trends in a cappella as a whole, and there's been a trend towards using classical or Indian motifs in different songs. Can you just speak to that and how that sort of spreading into a cappella as a whole, and how your organization specifically kind of pioneers that and is pushing for those sort of movements and trends in the community?
Yeah, of course. So Indian classical music is it's a very different style of music, and it's not something that you see very easily. There are not a lot of parallels that you can draw between Western classical music even and Indian classical music. And so just to give you a little bit of a background so that I can explain it a little bit better, Indian classical music plays off of scales called ragas. So the way it works is a song will be in a specific raga. And the best way I can think of describing a raga is the different scales. So if you have a harmonic scale, a harmonic minor versus a melodic minor, just each raga has a set of notes that you have to stay inside. And all of the songs in that specific raga they can't deviate out of those specific notes. So you'll see that if you listen to a song, it'll always stay within those same 6 or 7 notes and it doesn't come out of it. And it relies a lot on what we call sargam, which is basically the do, re, mi, fa, so's of Indian classical music. And it plays a lot on that to create the sounds that you hear. And so you'll see that a lot of teams now, especially South Asian teams, whether they're choosing to do Bollywood songs or more Indian classical songs, you'll hear that they use a lot of classical sargam pieces as little inserts here and there to make their arrangements more interesting. And I think it gives a whole nother dimension to the song. And you can even take a party song that, is a 4-chord party song and add a really cool like Indian classical piece to it and make it something completely different. And I think that, as you were saying, that it is traveling more into the contemporary a cappella scene as well. I think the best example for me of that is As Long As You Love Me, that was done by the Nor'easters and one of their albums. If you listen, when they do the really cool build up at the end, there's actually a motif from a classical based Indian song that's kind of inserted into the background. And I think it sounds so cool. It's like, I mean, for me, it's really exciting because I recognize it. And I'd hope it was exciting for others listening too, because I think it brings a completely different dimension to the song that maybe wouldn't have been there if you hadn't chosen to, explore a little bit outside of the confines of the song.
Right. And I think something that you mentioned that's kind of interesting too is how you particularly liked it because it's something that you recognize and something that you enjoyed. So for people who don't really recognize that type of music or don't have a history or don't know about it, how do you think people should work these motifs in a way that's accessible to those who have never heard that type of song before or don't recognize it?
Mm-hmm. I think that the best way to start that off would be for teams should just, if you listen to more Indian music, you'll start picking up little themes and motifs that you would want to include in your own arrangements. And I think it's in small doses. If you start with just a tiny little 8-measure section that has a background piece in it that people start to enjoy, if you as you include more and more, I think it'll become a little bit more mainstream and people will start to enjoy it more. I actually also think that on the flip side, I have had non-Desi audiences are the ones that really appreciate the Indian classical pieces the most, more than maybe a majority Indian Desi crowd. Because they know the songs, they kind of expect it and it's cool to them, but it's not whoa, mind-blowing. But I think that when you haven't heard the music before and you get to see all the intricacies being played out on stage, it's really exciting, and hopefully it'll encourage them to listen to more Indian music or Bollywood music.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm interested in, because there's clearly a lot of traditions in Indian music that kind of run perpendicular to Western music, quote unquote. So for singers that are singing in South Asian groups, what is the typical background in terms of education, as a child, as a young adult growing up and learning this music for you personally, or what do you find is kind of generally the background, because I'm very unfamiliar?
Yeah, so in terms of just musical education background, from my experience, actually, a lot of South Asian groups have members that have a very non-traditional music background, and that's not just to say a more Indian-oriented music background. It's more that they've never read sheet music before. They don't really know what the little circles on the page mean. We've had everyone from shower singers who've just grown up with their parents always singing Bollywood music, who always grown up listening to music nonstop, because that's a very big part of South Asian families. It's just that there's always music playing in the background. And then on the flip side, you have trained Indian classical singers too, who've been learning since they were 3 or 4 years old, who've been learning. There are actually 2 styles of Indian classical music, Hindustani and Carnatic, and each from the 2 different parts of India, North and South. But we've had people who are very trained in those 2 styles of classical music who come into it, and they're the ones who kind of push for the more classical pieces. They are the ones who work towards including that side of Indian music into the arrangements as well. So for example, I started learning Indian classical music when I was 4 years old. And it's been something that I've been doing forever. But coming to the United States, there wasn't really a lot of places for me to, sing and perform. And so I got into choir. And that's where I started with a cappella. And eventually I found a way to incorporate my Indian classical background into my a cappella and my choir singing. So it was really great. And I think that's a lot of people share the similar experience to what I went through.
So related to that, I think historically a lot of a cappella has started with, kind of imitating instruments, or contemporary a cappella rather, kind of started with imitating instruments and trying to, replicate the songs that you hear in popular music. So in Indian music, the instruments are, by and large, very different than the ones that, Western music has. There's obviously integrated things, but like whether it's sitar, tablas, or the millions of other things that I can't pronounce, like it's just very different sounds. So how do groups go about trying to, replicate those sounds? Because obviously there's the standard, you got the janas for guitars or whatever it is, but with those kind of, percussion or string or bowed instruments, they're very different. So how do you go about doing that?
I think that's actually one of the biggest challenges that we face as a genre at the moment. In general, Indian music isn't very conducive to a cappella, so you kind of have to take your creative license with it. If you listen to, well, I guess it's changing a little bit now, but generally, if you listen to like Bollywood music or Indian classical pieces, chords really aren't something that are really big. Like, people don't really pay a lot of attention to chords, and it's like something that I had no idea what they were until I started like singing in choirs. And so trying to arrange a Bollywood song or an Indian classical song into like a cappella terms with like SATB is, I think, it's a feat on its own, because you kind of have to create the chords. You have to create the background for it in order to make it work. I think that by and large, the groups are sticking with do's and da's still. And we haven't really found the appropriate sounds and syllables yet. But you actually can see a lot of like tabla sounds rising up in the arrangements that teams are doing. So the tabla sounds are replicated by spoken word, basically. And so when someone's learning the tabla or the mridangam, which is another Indian drum, they usually learn the spoken word version first, and then they start playing it. So the way that it's being translated into a cappella now is to use the spoken word itself in place of the beatboxing. And it's a very rhythmic speak, so it works in our favor. So I think that's where you get a little bit more of the Indian flavor.
Because I personally have had some interest in, South Asian and Indian music for a while. Like, is konakol, I don't know if I'm probably butchering that, but like, is that what you're referencing, or is that a different thing?
The konakol, yeah, you actually said it very well. But really, konakol is what it is. It's a spoken word of like rhythmic syllables, the way you would beatbox, but for like tabla and mridangam sounds.
That's awesome. I love that style of like percussion or whatever you would call it. And who would you say, this kind of shifting a little bit, but who would you say are like the people on like the front lines of South Asian a cappella today? Like who do you think like groups are looking to like do something like that, or doing innovative new techniques with the genre?
So I think that the inspiration for all of this is mostly coming from the music directors in the Bollywood industry who are really working towards making Indian music more accessible to the world at large, and accessible in the terms of having more people from different backgrounds appreciate it. Because I think they're taking a few more liberties with how they're arranging the soundtracks for their movies, which gives the a cappella groups who are, taking the songs from these movies a little bit more to work with. Specifically in terms of things like the spoken word and like the cool little inserts that you see in Desi A Cappella. Really, again, it all comes back to like Indian classical music, and I wish I had a different answer for you there. But really, it's what's been passed down from generation to generation through the ages, and it's really great. And I think that there are a lot of a cappella groups who are experimenting with that and working towards making that a little bit more well known.
So just circling back to your organization, so we know that you have a big competition coming up on April 22nd. It's the All-American Awaz. Could you just speak to that a little bit and what the whole concept behind that is?
Yeah, of course. So I'm really excited about this project, so I'm excited to talk about it. So my organization is the Network of Desi A Cappella and the Association of South Asian A Cappella. Our goal as an organization is to connect singers from all around the country who are partaking in Desi A Cappella. There are over 70 groups in the country right now, like collegiate groups, and I think maybe 30 or 40 of them are competing teams. And we wanted to give them an opportunity to bring Desi A Cappella to a bigger stage. So we decided to start a ICCA-style competition that was geared towards specifically Desi A Cappella. So there are 5 established bid competitions around the country right now. Well, they've been established for like 10 years or so. And what we decided to do was take the winners from each of those competitions, along with 2 wildcard teams, and give them the opportunity to like duke it out on stage in New York City. The reason we also wanted to do this was because I think that the teams kind of get settled into a little bubble because the competitions are in different parts of the country. So you get a very similar cross-section of teams that go to these competitions every year. And we hope that by giving them something to work towards, like a national championship, that they would be more inclined to, like we could get more groups coming out and getting more participation in these competitions and getting them to perform on bigger stages.
Are you currently in the group Desi A Cappella, or were you in the past?
I was in the group.
Okay.
I am not currently in the group. Yeah, I was the music director for the A Cappella for 3 years. Yeah. And I was in the group for a total of 4 years, and that's where I first found my love for Desi A Cappella. Through the A Cappella, I was able to attend competitions all around the country, and I got to meet so many cool teams. And like I came to the realization that really there's so many shared experiences between all of us that it seemed a shame not to capitalize on that. And really there wasn't a lot of avenues for alumni of the circuit to get involved as well. So a lot of different initiatives came into play when we wanted to create this network. Just give everyone a way to connect with each other, give alumni a way to keep in contact with teams and get them involved with, keep them singing as they graduate and move through.
That's awesome that you guys have put that together, because I'm sure it was a really big undertaking in terms of logistics and everything, because, like varsity vocals for ICCA is, a big machine. So really props to you guys for setting that up. And I hope it turns out really, really well and you continue it forever and ever. So we're reaching the end of this episode today. So kind of what we like to ask all our guests is to kind of talk about just whatever trends are, exciting you in a cappella today, and then what you hope to challenge groups to do coming up. And that can be, Desi a cappella or contemporary a cappella, like whatever you feel.
Okay. I think that my favorite trends in a cappella are that teams are opting for the non-traditional arrangements, and I love it. It's not about how best you can imitate a song anymore. It's about how you can take a song and make it your own, which is phenomenal, because I think that there's so much more creativity going into it, which is really exciting. What I would like to see is for Desi A Cappella, obviously, to kind of join the big umbrella of contemporary a cappella in a bigger way. I want to see more South Asian teams, and even the ones that are competing at All-American Avaz, to explore applying for the ICCAs and performing at even bigger venues than what we can offer right now. And I think that's what's going to be great, because I think that it'll integrate us seamlessly into that circuit. It's already there, the structure's there, like people love the music. It's just a question of teams feeling more confident that they can go and express the style of music in the bigger a cappella community.
Awesome. So we wish you the best of luck with your competition coming up, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course, I'm really excited that I got to talk to you guys. It was very fun for me.
And it was fun for us as well. We hope you'll join us next week for a new episode of Head Voice.
Gama